Um, my name is Trevin Hannibal, and I'm a professor in accounting and finance. As at now, I'm attached to a private university in British Columbia, Canada, and I'm also a visiting professor at a public college in Canada. A little bit of a background about myself. Well, I've been teaching accounting and finance for roughly more than 10 years. And I'm glad to be part and parcel of this project, of this interview, because I myself was a teacher in advanced level economics several years back, I guess 11, 12 years back at Royal Institute. So let's jump into the first question that you asked, which is on my current occupation. I think I answered that. And how you use English to communicate. Well, in Canada, there are two main languages. One is English and the other one is French. Those are the two languages. And for example, I'm a Canadian citizen. So even when you take the oath, you have the option of taking the oath in English as well as in French, right? So if English is a main language, of course it's the lingua franca, right? That's how you, especially there are some provinces that are predominantly French based, which is like if you go to a province like Quebec, which is a bit south of central Canada, it's fully French. But apart from that, most of the other provinces in Canada, we are towards the west. British Columbia is towards the west, and we use English, right? It's important. That's how you communicate. That's what you're expected at your workplace. Even as a teacher, that's the language in which I speak, communicate, do everything. So the next question, how does English proficiency impact job opportunities and career advancement in your country's job market, considering cultural norms and expectations? Okay, I think I got the question. So, regarding cultural norms and English, it's a very interesting topic to begin with. Now, if you take the English that we speak in Sri Lanka is very British influenced. I need to say that at the very get-go. The English that we speak in Sri Lanka is British influence. Is because of the British influence, because Sri Lanka was a colony of the British. But even if you take the English that we speak in Canada, of course, the English that we have is as a result of the British, but it has an American spin to it, right? So let me give you a few examples to understand this. For example, if you met someone in the morning in Sri Lanka, you would say, hello, good morning, right? You would say, hello, good morning. But here in Canada, the first thing that you would say if you met someone is not good morning. Well, you can say, no one is going to kill you. But what you would say is you would say, hey, how's it going? General response would be, I'm keeping well. How about yourself? I'm well. Thank you. You meet the next person. Hey, how's it going? I'm keeping well. How about yourself? I'm keeping well too. Thank you. That's it. And you move on. And sometimes it might be a conversation. So for example, if in Sri Lanka, if you said, hey, how are you doing? That is a conversation. You will stop and you will You will have a conversation with that person, but not in Canada. You will be just passing by, because if this is a person, this is a person. If you're passing by, you will say, good morning, and the person will say good morning, and you will be moving. In Sri Lanka, if someone said, hey, how are you doing? This guy would stop, and then you will have a conversation. But not in Canada. You will be like, hey, how's it going? I'm keeping well. How about yourself? I'm good, well, as thank you, and you're moving. Right? And I can give you another example as well. Let's say you went to a person's place, and they said, would you like to have some coffee? Right? In Sri Lanka, you would say, for sure. Right? You would say, for sure, I would like to have some coffee. But in Canada, you would rarely hear the word for sure. For example, if someone said, hey, would you like to have some coffee? Your general response would be, you bet. You bet. That's the YOUBET, you bet. You bet means, or sometimes you would say, you betcha. That means for sure. I would like to have some coffee. Hey, would you like to have some coffee? You bet. That sounds like a plan. That's a cultural thing, right? It's how it is. It is what it is. That's another word. It is what it is. For example, in Sri Lanka, you would say, that's how things happen here. That's how people normally speak. Instead, in Canada, you would say, it is what it is. It is what it is. So I think I give you some cultural examples there, and I think that's sufficient enough. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, English proficiency in the job market. As I said, there are two main languages. One is English and other one is French, right? English is the lingua franca. You need to have your English. But it's the normal. I mean, it's kind of a. It's like how can I say? There is no other option. You have only English, or either you need to speak in French. But especially towards the Western, in the provinces in the West, English is most predominantly used than certain provinces like Quebec in Canada. So if you take the Western provinces, you have British Columbia. That's where we are in. We live in a city called Vancouver. Right, and then you got from British Columbia, then you have Alberta, right, Calgary, Alberta, and then you got Manitoba, Winnipeg, and then you got Saskatchewan, then you got Central Canada. That's where you get Toronto, and the capital of the city, which is Ottawa, capital of Canada, Ottawa, and in the Central Canada, it's called Ontario, and then you got Quebec, and then Newfoundland, Labrador, and then you got some provinces on top as well. So if you take most of the provinces, especially in the West, in any job that you apply for, it doesn't matter what industry it may be, you are expected to speak, write, and communicate in English. That's super important. So that's how it goes. Is there anything else that I would like to add to that? Well, I guess not. That's pretty much it. So you need English. It's necessary, right? It's kind of implied that you're supposed to know everything and do everything in English, because there is no other language, right? English is the lingua franca. Good. Question number 4. Okay, race and ethnicity, those are kind of very sensitive topics here in Canada. Because if you take especially, your question was on how cultural diversity with English proficiency has an influence on job opportunities. Canada is a country that that promotes diversity, inclusion, diversity, multiculturalism. These are hot topics in Canada, and well, they try to be very. When it comes to the ethnicity component, they would like to have multicultural. That's what they promote. Even if you take in at the workplace, sometimes even when in the case studies that we prepare, they try to make the case studies more multicultural. I'll give you an example. Sometimes, let's say we do a case study on using Canadian names or English names. Let's say John, Adam, but because there is a Indian population, Indian Canadians there are Chinese Canadians in Canada, there are Sri Lankan Canadians. So whenever we create a case study, sometimes we might use names that relates to that audience as well. So sometimes you might see in a case study saying Simranjeet Kaur started a business, Jaspal Singh started a business, right? Ching Tu started a business, and you would give the details and it would go on. So in terms of landing a job, race, ethnicity is not something that the Canadians would take into consideration, because if you select from a particular race, then that you being racist and you're being very discriminative, right? So few things that Canadians do is you do not mention your race in your resume or in your CV. The shortened version of your profile is called the resume, and if you want your job history and your profile in detail, that's called CV here. So generally they would ask you for a resume, and you don't include your picture. You don't include your picture. You don't include your age, right? You don't include your ethnicity. And, even talking about these things at workplace, unless it's a celebration, can be very, very sensitive. You need to really think twice before you make a comment, because that can be taken as offensive, right? So that's where it is at in Canada, especially the city that I live in Vancouver. And that's the story in a nutshell, right? Question number 5. Okay, some barriers. So you're talking about some stumbling blocks or some limitations. The word that we use here for barriers is a caveat. That's the word we use. So that was something new, because even coming from Sri Lanka, I would use the word like barrier, an obstacle, a limitation. That's what we use, right? Those are the words we use. But here they use the word a caveat. So what type of caveats are we looking at? Okay, there are several ways that I can go with this. So if you take migrant workers, they come from their native countries, and your accent, the way you pronounce words is something that might distinguish you between a person that was born and raised in Canada and a person that you migrated. Now, you might have the best English, you might speak Queen's English, you might be very proficient in your English, but for example, when I interview people in my department, right, when someone speaks, I would know straight away in the first 5 seconds whether this person is a migrant or whether this person was he was born and raised in Canada, because that's called the accent, right? We speak from a Sri Lankan accent. What I'm speaking now is not a Canadian accent. It's a Sri Lankan accent, right? I've been living in Canada now for over, I guess, 6+ years now. Initially, I landed in Quebec, then we moved to Ontario, then to BC, and we've been here for like 5-6 years now. And it takes time for you to get into that accent. I might have words like Canadian slang that I use. But I see this as, I don't want to say that it's a barrier, but when people hire, I think there is a tendency where they might give a preference to a person who is very local. For let's take a job. Let's say for an example. So your question is, what are some barriers when it comes to English proficiency? I would say it's not about, like the grammar and the technicality of the language. It's about how local you sound. That's important in Canada, right? I'll tell you some Canadian slang, and you would not understand it unless you were living here. For example, you go to a coffee shop and you say, "Hey, can I have a double-double?" You go to a coffee shop in Sri Lanka and you say double-double, it means nothing. But you say, go to a coffee shop, especially in Tim Hortons in Canada, and you say, "Can I have a double-double?" That means, can I get a coffee with 2 sugars and 2 creams? That's what double-double means, right? I just gave you the example before. You bet, that means for sure, right? Hey, would you like to kill the dart outside? That's a common phrase. Hey, would you like to kill the dart? That means, would you like to smoke outside? Right? Hey, that's not the right route. You need to hang a Larry. You need to hang a Larry. Hang a Larry means take a left. Hang a Roger means take a right. Right? I could go on like that. That's called Canadian slang. And the way you pronounce your words is kind of important. So, this is really interesting. When you would see a person like Kumar Sangakkara. I remember back in the day when he sometimes spoke with an accent, right? I don't think he speaks like that at home. Do you know why he speaks like that? That's not because he wants to show off. I believe the reason why he speaks in an accent is because then he relates to the English people in England. Because if you speak in your Sri Lankan accent, the normal way you would speak English, they might not understand it. I faced that in the very first year. I knew my English very well, right? But whenever I speak English, you would see responses like this. I'm sorry, what? What did you say? Pardon me? There would be so many clarifications in that conversation. Why? Because the way I pronounce those words are a bit different to what they hear it. For example, I hear many times people use the word, we pronounce the medication. Like, let's say, we say vitamins. Can I get vitamin C, please? Right? Please is another big word. For everything you need to say please. If not, you become very offensive. When you go to your canteen, if you're at Royal Institute and you wanted, let's say, a roll, or you wanted a hot dog, you would say, "Can I have one hot dog? 2 hot dogs." Right? That's how you say it, right? But here you need to say, "Please, can I have 1 hot dog, please?" And you need to smile. And if they say, "Would you like it with some ketchup and mustard?" "Yes, please." You can't just say yes. Yes, please. The please word needs to come. But anyway, I was coming back to this. I was talking about, how certain Canadian slangs are used. So it's kind of important that you sound local. Kumar Sangakkar, the reason why he was speaking in England accent is simply because he was trying to relate to, and he wanted himself to be understood by the locals. Same story here. Whenever I speak in English with my colleagues at work, the Canadians, I would like to like slow it down. I think I'm so used to it. Even now, I'm doing the same thing. But if I was speaking in Sri Lanka, I would not speak like that. Right? I would be like, I would speak the way I speak in Sri Lanka, which is generally fast. But here, and did you notice that when I said here, you would generally speak at a lower pace, and like rhyming words, bringing a tone to the word when you pronounce. All these are part and parcel of some cultural norms. The question that you asked before. So, just to answer a question on some barriers, I think the accent, I don't want to use that as a barrier, but it's kind of important that you sound a little bit local. Especially when you go to a restaurant, especially at your workplace, since your question was on, landing a job, right? When you're seeking a job. When you go for an interview, there are certain things that they would quickly capture, that would quickly click to them, saying that, oh, this guy is a local or not, right? I think this question is kind of something that we touched upon before. I guess question number 6 for career progression and for workplace roles. Yes. Well, career progression, English and career progression. Well, of course, you get the job because you know English, and I think for the career progression, language does have an impact. But of course, that was the very first thing that they would check in the interview and before they get you on board, right? So, I mean, of course, if you have that right skills and you know how to use the words in the right way, and I think more than English, they would consider things like leadership qualities, passion towards the job that you're doing, and etc. So, my personal experience is that I try to sound very local. I try my best to sound very local. Even when you're drafting an email, you might want to use Canadian English, not United States English, not Texas English, but Canadian English. This is why whenever you go to a job in Canada, they always look for Canadian experience. So I think I did answer those questions in my previous example. So let me jump into question number 7. Okay, I think this question number 7 is kind of linked with question number 3, I guess. Yeah, question number 2, I guess. Yeah, cultural norms. But well, my race and identity in my home country, how did it influence getting a job and made it easy? I think that's important. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. So culture from Sri Lanka and how did it affect here? Personally, for me, I studied at St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, right? One of the top leading schools in Sri Lanka. Whether you agree with that or not, that's a joke. But of course, in St. Thomas's College, the lingua franca is English, right? Everything is English. Of course, I think certain subjects and certain courses, you have the option of doing it in singular when you're studying, but at sports, extracurricular activities, most of the studies are done in English. And when you say English, it's the British English. I myself was a Christian, so we would go to chapel every day of the week except for Wednesday, which is where we had assembly in the main hall. and everything was in English, right? So you knew your English. I think definitely that background that I got from my alma mater, St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, definitely did help. Not only with the language, but it's with when it comes to things like personality, how you handle situations, your management of things, getting things under control. All these things do matter, right? So English was part of it. The language was part of it. That's number one. As you notice, my name is Trevin Hannibal. So my father is a Burger and my mother is a Sinhalese. She goes as a Pires, but my father, the surname is Hannibal. And as you know, Hannibal is a Burger name, right? So from my father's side, even from my mother's side, they spoke a lot of English. It was even especially in Sri Lanka, it's like, you would like to speak in English because speaking in English is kind of a prestige. They don't see it like that here in Canada. But when you speak in English, knowing English is a kind of a prestige, right? Like if a person knew how to speak good English, that's kind of a big asset. But here in Canada, you're supposed to know it. That's like just imagine you go somewhere and you don't know Sinhala in Sri Lanka. Just imagine if you don't know Sinhala, can you survive? That's the same way how they view English. It's not a second language, it's their main language. In Sri Lanka, it's a second language. So personally for me, I think my school, my alma mater, as well as my background, my father's side, they never spoke in Sinhala. From my father, the Hannibals, their jokes, the stuff that they did, the songs that they sang in parties, everything was English. So all of that, I guess, kind of influences a person. Their background, their upbringing influences a person. But the biggest challenge when you come to a country like Canada is sounding local and how quickly you will be able to adopt to their way of speaking English. Because you might know English, you might be a teacher in English, but still there is a massive, I'm not saying a massive learning curve to get adopted. So there's a nice English saying, when you're in Rome, do as Romans do. All right, there you go. That's my 2 cents on all of these questions that you asked. I hope this was very valuable for you. Thank you for inviting me, and it was great to share my opinions and my experiences in this project.